Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bronson's Soapbox. Today, I'm going to be celebrating one of many anniversaries this year in 30 years of Zelda. I know some of you thought I was going to talk Pokemon because the Pokemon Sun and Moon announcement, but with the whole Twilight Princess HD being out this year, and in my opinion, Zelda being a more important franchise to the history of video games, I'm going to talk about some Zelda. So, Zelda was a franchise that came out in 1987 in the States, and it was kind of one of a kind. Like because most games back then were trying to emulate the arcade. Like there's these experiences, you sit down, you play them, they're done. But Zelda was this what at the time felt like a living, breathing world, and that the world that so many games trying to emulate today, and it really felt like, and a lot of games still try and emulate that feeling today and fail. And what Zelda was one of those first games that you needed a battery in the cartridge to save it. And you look back on that game and it looks really archaic by today's standards. Like you have no idea where to go. You know, just like, oh, I need to figure out where the next dungeon is. I don't have a guide. Let me burn every single bush on the map. But with that archaic design came the idea, at least on consoles, of this adventure game. Like this, I'm this adventurer and there's this big world with all this stuff to do, and the fact that like in that game after the first one you can tackle the dungeons in any order, and like oh man, if you go into this dungeon and you might not be ready for it yet. Like yeah, of course there's the ideal order to do things, and that's what the guide would tell you to do, and that's what anyone who's played through it would tell you to do. But most people back in the day were just kind of, like I said, lighting random bushes on fire. Like, oh man, I don't know where the next thing is, so I'm just gonna fight dudes and collect money. And that was cool. And then Zelda 2 came out, and it was this weird, like, side-scrolling, super hard action game. Didn't really make sense that this was the sequel to the first Zelda, and then the first like real Zelda sequel happened. It was A Link to the Past. It was this beautiful color 16-bit thing, and they kind of like added some narrative, like real heavy narrative, and some like direction. Like this is where you're supposed to go. You need this item to progress to this thing. Like yeah, sometimes you wouldn't get you would fight a boss, you'd get an item in a dungeon, and then you wouldn't use it for the entire dungeon, or you'd have to beat a boss in that dungeon, and you wouldn't use the item you got in it. And that's why a lot of people like Link to the Past. Like, it was this kind of really good blend of freedom you would get in the original, but, like, not as guided as the later games was. And I personally love A Link to the Past. Link has pink hair. I mean, come on. Several years later, we'd finally get another one, an Ocarina of Time, and that's the one that everyone cites as the greatest game of all time. Like, define 3D gaming, and I could see why at the time that was, because at the time, 1998, really big open world that was alive and breathing in an adventure game. Now these were common in RPGs at the time, Final Fantasy VII, Chrono Cross, Chrono Trigger, etc. But it was something new in an adventure game, and it was this and you had NPCs who all looked like they were living different lives and towns and stuff like that. Like I remember playing that game for the first time as a kid and going into Hyrule Castle Town and seeing like this big open area and just being like, oh, it's a town, it's a living town, I can go do stuff in this town. And there really wasn't much to do, but it was this cool idea of and then the game had day-night cycles, like the old Zeldas, and the town would have different stuff at night. That was a cool idea at the time. And then it started things like Z targeting and things like that for combat, but it also started to do something to the Zelda franchise. And that was make it a little more linear. Because, you had this guide, this little fairy who'd tell you where to go, even though she was annoying as hell. And in every dungeon, you would get an item, and then you would use it on the boss and on the puzzles. And and then a Majora's Mask happened. And it kind of did things differently. You had to do the dungeons in a certain order, but you get all these side masks and side quests done where you didn't need it. And then Wind Waker, you had the boat thing, and you had some other diversionary stuff, and that in my opinion is the best Zelda because it feels like this big, awesome world. And come on, it's Pirate Zelda, and it's colorful, and the characters have all these emotions. Like, you look at a game like Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword. Yes, those games look good, especially the HD remake of Twilight Princess. All the scene footage of it looks great, but like, look at a cutscene in that game, and then look at Wind Waker, and which one has more feeling and like expressiveness to it, and which one just has this, in my opinion, more fun tone and conveys what the characters are trying to say a little better, or what their motivations are, how they're feeling. So it had this giant world that, like, there was a lot of stuff in it. And yeah, a lot of it was just like a piece of heart and like bigger things. And that Triforce quest was awful, but even though it had the linearity that you would get in that Ocarina kind of started, and Wind Waker continued to help and actually make it a little worse, it still felt like this big, free, open world. And then you had Twilight Princess, which, in my opinion, I love that game, but it continued further down the path. Then the world itself felt really hollow and empty. Like, you go to that first town, not like the starting area. Actually, the starting town kind of felt alive, but you go to that town that was like next to the volcano, and it feels like desolate and empty. Like, you go to Zora's domain after you've saved it, and like there are like 6 people there. It's like, and like the Hyrule Castle town doesn't even feel as alive as the one in Ocarina, and that's my big problem about Twilight Princess. I think Twilight Princess is some of the best combat in the franchise. Some of my favorite dungeons. That Ice Yeti dungeon is awesome. Easily some of the best looking and playing bosses, but the world itself feels the most desolate. And then you had that god awful go catch the bugs part. But it like kind of progressed it more down that path. And then you had Skyward Sword, which is easily the worst 3D Zelda, in my opinion. And yeah, the motion controls were really a cool idea for combat, and they were super fun. But the motion controls for everything else worked like shit. And it was the most linear Zelda, and the most closed off, because you had Skyloft, and then you had these tiny islands around it, but like they were super close to Skyloft, and they didn't feel like this big world. Yeah, Wind Waker had islands, but like getting to them felt like this magical world, and there was cool stuff on them, versus like Skyward Sword, which is like, oh, here's this one island with a treasure chest on it. Right, bye, dude. Not like, oh yeah, if you shoot the ice into the volcano, it freezes over and you can navigate the island, like in Wind Waker. And then, like I said, half the time the motion controls didn't work. They got the new Zelda coming out, though, and it looks really awesome. Like they said, oh, it's going to be this big open world, and I'm really hoping that A Link Between Worlds was kind of like a hint in what they're doing in that game, of like having the more comedic tone of Wind Waker, but and having still being a fun action game that's well made, but being more free, because like Wind Waker let you do the dungeons in any order, and it let you, or not Wind Waker, Jesus, A Link Between Worlds let you do the dungeons in any order after the first 2, and you could get all the items from the start, and they were, yeah, you had the Repo Bird to deal with, but other than him, it was a really fresh take on Zelda, and I'm like, yeah, do that for a console game with some other new stuff sprinkled in, and Zelda will kind of go back to what it could be. And I think that all, like, I kind of talk a lot of crap on, Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time in this, but this is all by the standards of Zelda games. The fact that all these are great, it's, even Skyward Sword with its massive amount of problems, it's a really good game that just has some issues. And happy birthday to Zelda. Zelda's a huge innovator, and Zelda was a game that influenced a lot of people in this industry to make really awesome games. And I hope that it has 30 more years of stuff like A Link to the Past and Ocarina and my personal favorite, Wind Waker. And hopefully when Twilight Princess HD is out the same day as this video, you'll buy it and play it and have a good time, because I know I am. Plus, that mid-dim emote looks sick. Please follow us on twitch.tv/GamerAccess, Facebook.com TheGamerAccess, and on Twitter @TheGamerAccess. Have an excellent week and check out all our awesome shows.